Well, hello, this is aircraft fabric covering with two Canadians, and we had a query from the United Kingdom about how to attach new fabric to the old fabric and make that joint. So we're going to give you just a little demonstration, and I hope this answers your question for you. But here's a piece of fabric that we just took off of an aircraft, but I can still demonstrate on that how we would make that joint. So we're going to start out by taking it off at structure, which is going to be a rib. And here's where a rib would be underneath here. And we'll start out by marking along the edge of the tape, right where the edge of the old tape was. So we're just going to mark that. And then we're going to take a utility knife. Now, this one is kind of a chipped up one, but we're going to try to make it work. All I'm after here is cutting through the old finish. That's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to cut into the fabric. I'm just trying to score the old finish. So I'm not using a lot of pressure, but I'm trying to create a line, a cut line in the finish so that that's where it will break, where the finish will break off. All right, so all I've done is gone through the finish. Now what I'm going to try to do is get underneath that finish and peel it off. So in this particular case, we're trying to access underneath the old tape. It takes a little bit to get it started, and then once we're started and we're underneath at that break point, then it'll come off fairly easy. So we'll just work our way in here to take that tape off. Now this one is attached fairly well. This is an old dope system, and you can see where we have got access. Actually, this looks to me like it's an original cotton tape that was on there. That's a cotton tape, but it works the same way with polyester tape, so it'll be the same way. So we're going to try to make sure that that's scored sufficiently. So that it's going to want to come right off. Down to the original. And that's going to expose the fabric right down. Now, if we had fasteners on there, if this was a rib in the middle of a bay somewhere, we're likely to have screws. We could have rib lacing. There are various different modes of attachment. And that area there, if it had screws and rivets in it, we would likely take those out, because we're going to want to put the new piece of fabric over top of that area so that it's overlapping about the same. Then we'll put all the original fasteners back in again, whether they be screws, rivets, or whatever attachment it might have been. What I like to do though now with that edge, it's a bit of a sharp edge, is I will take 400 grit sandpaper and water. I'm going to use the wet or dry paper, and I'm going to thin out that edge, taking the finish off and thinning out the edge, feathering it in somewhat. It's not going to be right down to the fabric, but we're going to be thinning it out. So that the coatings are off, and that when we go to apply the new finish, that's not a really sharp, hard edge. There'll be a finishing tape that goes back over top of the joint that we've made, and that will come right up next to this thin area that we're sanding down. Now I would like to sand it a little bit more so it's just about all of this red top coat is gone, and we're likely going to be down to seeing the silver. There's obviously a red or a white coat underneath red, which, by the way, you always want to apply a coat of white before you top coat with any light colors, reds, light blues, oranges, yellows, particularly because the silver reflectivity of the ultraviolet protection coating will change your color, and you don't want that to happen. So you will apply a coat of white underneath any top coat that's red or a lighter color. Okay? So you kind of get the idea of what we're doing there. You see how that's thinned down? You can see the silver. There's no sharp edge there anymore. And we'll just wipe that off. Make sure it's completely dry, even on the table underneath. All right. So this is likely the damaged area that you would have cut off because it's damaged and you're wanting to put new fabric on here. So we're just going to simulate that simply by drawing a straight line here. And we'll cut our fabric. And that damage would likely have been all cut out. And get rid of that. Now, this is where we want to make our joint with the new fabric patch that we're putting on. We've done the repair, whatever needed to be done in the wing or at the wing tip. And now we're going to apply the new tape, or pardon me, the new fabric. And we're going to leave it back from the edge just a little bit. So you're going to wind up with about I would say 1.5 inch overlap. Here's our polytack cement to attach the fabric. And we will just spread that on there. Put the fabric on, push the fabric down into the wet bed of cement. And if you've got areas that aren't cemented enough, you can lift it and put more down. See, the nicest part about working with polytack or the polyfiber system is that cement is so easy to work with.
Isn't this dope?
To make it exactly the way you want it to be. Dope. Okay, now if you're using the dope system, you'd be using super seam cement. Works exactly the same way. So that's how we would be attaching the fabric on there. Let it dry, let it completely dry. You can go ahead now and put your screws, rib lacing, rivets, whatever kind of fastening was on there, now through the 2 layers, the old layer and the new layer. Quite often what I'll do is I'll make sure that I have well marked, because it's sometimes kind of hard to see where those holes are in the ribs. We'll mark them to make sure that we know where to push through to put the rivets or the screws. Let it dry. This is where a little patience comes in. You want to make sure that is thoroughly dry. And of course, you're going to go around the trailing edge and the leading edge or wherever the tip or whatever area, however far you have to go. So the whole peripheral edge is going to be cemented. All right? Okay, let's assume that we're dry. Now what we would do is we would take the iron and we'd shrink that fabric. And that's going to pull up a lot of tension. It could be that maybe by releasing this that you've relaxed a little tension. Don't let that bother you, because if you've got a fairly decent sized piece of fabric that you're adding in, when you shrink that at 250 degrees, you're pulling it in 5%. So keep in mind that comes up to quite a bit of tension. The larger the fabric you have, the more tension that's going to create. 350 degrees on the iron, a calibrated iron, and you're going to see a 10% shrink. So that'll pull all of the loose fabric back up tight again and make this all nice and smooth. So when we're all done with that, we're going to be putting a piece of finishing tape back over top of the edge of that. Now this is a smaller piece of tape I have, but here's how I would be applying that right now so that it comes right up close to the edge of where we had cut it before. So our paint edge is right along the edge of that, and it's overlapping. You like to have at least a 3/8 or to a 1/2 inch of overlap, and fill that whole area back in. We'd apply it with dope and make sure that it's fully saturated and let it dry. Again, a good place to have some patience. So I forgot to mention that underneath here, before you put the screws in, you'll be putting the reinforcing tape, which is a tape that reinforces the fabric where the fasteners are going. So that would go on next. All right, that's where that would go. And then our fasteners would go through that. You're gonna coat this with dope, a number of coats. Then you would apply the finishing tape like we described over top of the whole thing. This is now a tape over top of your glue seam, as it's called for in the manual. And build up your coats, and you should be finished. This should help you to join fabric, even though maybe the rib is not considered structure on the wing itself, because it's attached to the wing and secured to the wing, not with cement now, but with whatever was originally on a certified airplane. Could be screws, rivets, Martin clips, Cessna clips, rib lacing. That will give you a good structural joint in that area, and you should have no problem. I hope this has been of help to you in understanding how to put a patch on a wing and how to join it over top of a rib cap strip. Good luck with your work.